Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to today's media briefing regarding the search for Mr. Rob Stewart. My name is Senior Chief Nick Janszen. I'm with the 7th District Public Affairs Office, and I'll be introducing today's speakers. With us today, we have the Commanding Officer of Coast Guard Sector Key West, Captain Jeffrey Janszen, spelled Jaffffrey, Janszen. We also have Monroe County Sheriff Rick Ramsey, spelled Rickramsay. And from the Isle Morada Fire Rescue, we have Fire Chief Terry Abel, spelled Terryrabel. Captain Janszen will be speaking on behalf of the joint agency search effort, and following the brief, we'll have a few minutes to answer some questions that you may have. Please allow time here for everyone to ask questions. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Captain Janszen.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here today. Just like to make a brief statement, and then after that, I'll follow up with questions. On 31 January at 5:13 p.m., watchstanders at Sector Key West Command Center received a report of a missing diver. The diver is identified as 37-year-old Rob Stewart from Toronto, Canada. He was missing near Alligator Reef. A crewman on board the motor vessel Pisces reported that Stewart resurfaced and then was not seen again after he surfaced. Coast Guard watchstanders issued an urgent marine information broadcast, launched a station Alamorada 33-foot boat crew like you see here today, launched an Air Station Miami MH-65 Dolphin helicopter with crew, diverted the crew of the Coast Guard cutter Charles Sexton. So we had a lot of assets on scene initially when this started. We've been almost at the 72-hour limit since Mr. Stewart was not seen from. Assisting with the search included crews from an H-60 helicopter from Naval Air Station Key West, Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, Monroe County Sheriff's Office, Alamorada Fire Rescue, U.S. Border Patrol. As I speak, there is a Coast Guard C-130 aircraft from Air Station Clearwater currently flying. This aircraft will fly until sunset. Once this search is complete, the search will be suspended. The decision to suspend the search is very difficult, and it's not made lightly. Our hearts go out to Mr. Stewart's family, especially his parents, Brian and Sandy, who I met with earlier today. I'd also like to thank all the agencies and volunteers who aided in this search for the past 72 hours. We had multiple air, surface, and dive teams. I really do appreciate the coordination on this very extensive search. I'll now take any questions that you have.
What is it that makes you decide that you want to suspend the search?
Yeah, every case is different. Suspending the search, like I said, is a very difficult decision. We've been very fortunate that we've had favorable weather conditions the last 3 days. That really does help in our search efforts. We also take into account survivability. In this case, a person in the water, a functional survivability is about 72 to 75 hours. We're about at that point right now. But again, there's a lot of factors. The last known position is a very important part of this case. We had a last known position. When we look at search, we do a computer search model that we put in input, and it gives us a probability area. We also dropped from aircraft a self-locating data marker buoy. These devices give us real-time drift information. There was consistency between where we dropped the SLDMBs, and they drifted into the computer-generated search area, and this is where we've been searching. So this area has been searched consistently for the last 3 days.
Can you talk about how his physical abilities and experience played into all this?
Right. Mr. Stewart's father shared his, obviously very familiar with the water. He's been in the Florida Keys before his diving. He's in very good shape. We know that he was wearing a dark dry suit. He also had a rebreather device, which basically circulates the rebreather device that he was wearing. It's not like a typical open water scuba dive. It recircles the oxygen. And it takes the CO2 and converts it into oxygen. So that was the type of breathing apparatus he's wearing. When he did surface, He did not have any type of regulator or anything in his mouth. He had about 14 pounds of weight. On that dive, one of the other personnel had gotten on the boat, had passed out, and they were administering oxygen to that diver on the boat. At the time Rob surfaced, the boat was trying to pick him up, and then they lost sight of him. So that was the last time that Rob was seen. Yeah, so I believe sunset is at 6:14 this evening, and at that time I've already told the family that we would suspend the search. Are there any other questions?
Have there been divers in that area?
Yes, there have. So we've had, not in addition to Coast Guard fast response cutters that have been out there throughout the night, we've had daylight searches, we've had civilian aircraft searching as well, and we've had multiple dive teams. Sheriff Ramsey's here today, and I would thank him for his partnership and his dive team. They've helped us out in other cases as well. The complexity with the dive is complicated because most divers, at least I know with the Sheriff's Department and FWC and even the Coast Guard divers, normally only go to a depth of about 150 feet. Where Mr. Stewart was diving, he was diving at a depth of 220 feet. This is considered a very deep dive, and very few divers are qualified to dive at that depth. But we did have some special dive capability. From what I understand from the divers, the reports are the visibility is only about 5 to 6 feet underwater. So yes, we did use divers throughout the last 3 days. Yes, sir.
How's the condition of the other diver?
The condition of the diver, once he was administered oxygen on board the motor vessel Pisces, he regained consciousness and he refused any further medical attention. So as far as we know, he's doing fine.
And did he give any light to if they both got sick down there?
We really don't know what happened. We know it was the third dive of the day. The Coast Guard will do investigation considering this is a marine casualty. We normally do these investigations to find out if there's anything we can do differently that would help others. But that investigation is still pending, and we're going to look at we're going to talk to the crew in more detail and find out is there anything that we can pass on to the dive community.
With that, we have time for just 2 more questions.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the specific nomenclature of the dive. I do know it's what they call a closed circuit system. In other words, when you exhale the CO2, there's devices inside which convert it into oxygen, and that way it's used because there's no bubbles. It's a closed circuit type system, and as far as we know, that was the system that he was using. But no further indication other than that. Other than one of the divers that he dove with told me he had approximately 14 pounds of weight included in his gear.
Last question.
Yeah, we don't know. Obviously, with Mr. Stewart's dive information, we're trying to get as much information as we can. The family's been very helpful, by the way. I know they're happy with the Coast Guard's efforts. The search area was expansive. It was over 5,500 square miles searched. This is basically the size of the state of Connecticut, if you can imagine how large this search area is. And we have saturated the area. We're confident that we've done everything we can from the Coast Guard perspective, working with our federal, state, and local agencies. Again, my hearts and prayers go out to the Stewart family. And at this time, we have time for more questions?
Actually, no, that will actually conclude today's news brief. Myself and a member of my staff will be available